over the starting handle, keep going.
If it's awkward, come back this way, sir. If you feel awkward, I think I will, because I'll come and sit here.
Manage to crash it.
You go over the middle, sir, if you would. Straight over the middle.
Yep.
Straight over the middle. Try and get everybody in, if you can. The youngsters can go over it, so you just sit there, sir. Please.
Yes, thank you.
Over the middle, over the middle. Youngsters over the middle.
Oh, I'm not a youngster.
Yeah, over the middle. You look young to me, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Mind, everybody looks young to me. Who said that? Who said that? Oh, yeah. No need to be like that. Really. So if you come this way, sit along the side here, sir. Yeah, he'll come. Now yeah, come this way, sir. Slide along here. 3. Oh, we'll get them in. Don't worry, Goddy, we'll get them in. The record is 39 in the tank.
39.
Oh, they're 2-year-olds.
12-year-olds. 12-year-olds.
I suppose it's still a bit short.
We had a school in 190 children in one day, and we were putting them in groups. And unfortunately, one group, 39, well, 2 groups actually, arrived at the same time, which was not a problem. The problem was their coach was here and they were about to leave.
Oh, yeah.
So we had to get all 39 in, well, 38, because I was in as well. So there was 38 and myself, 39 is the record. They couldn't speak, which was lovely for me, because I did no abuse from 12-year-old children, which was very nice. I liked it. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome inside the best tank in the Tank Museum here at Bovington. And it is the best. I'm not saying it because it's my favourite tank. It just happens to be the best. It's a Mark IV, second generation British heavy tank from the First World War. It was built in 1917 and is a male tank. I'm sure you know the difference between a male and a female, but I will run through it. Female would have had 2 machine guns in that sponson, 2 in that, 1 at the front. And in the Mark IV they would have been Hotchkiss machine guns, but the one at the front would have been a Lewis machine gun. And on the male tank we have a 6-pounder Hotchkiss gun, supported by a Hotchkiss machine gun, 6-pounder Hotchkiss gun, supported by a Hotchkiss machine gun, and a Lewis gun at the front. And the reason we have Lewis guns at the front, the Hotchkiss uses a strip magazine. And between the commander and the gunner, the commander and driver 1, there's not enough room. So a Lewis gun's got a roundel magazine, stick that on, you can fire the gun a lot easier. So Lewis gun at the front. It weighs approximately 28 tons, and there would have been a crew of 8. So you can see we are slightly overcrowded today. However, if I was the section commander, as the officer of the tank, I would have had a 9th member of crew in here. And the 9th member of crew would have been a mechanic, because as the section commander my tank must never break down, so I will have a 9th member of crew in here who is a mechanic. So the engine powered in the middle, this is the beast that's going to fire us up. This is a Silent Night, 105 horsepower petrol engine. It's a straight 6 13 litre. It's a sleeve valved petrol engine, and it will push 28 tons of tank along at a whopping 3.5 miles an hour on a road. Cross country, that's going to be down to 1 to 1.5 miles an hour. But it's not a main battle tank. This is an infantry support vehicle. It was designed specifically to enable the infantry to follow it. It would flatten barbed wire, take out local machine gun and artillery positions, and allow the infantry into the trenches. That was what it was designed to do, and that's exactly what it did, and it did it very well. So, 8-man crew inside the vehicle. The gentleman seated to my left is driver 1. And driver 1 has absolutely no responsibility whatsoever. All he's going to do is put his foot on the brake and the clutch and change gear, and that's all he's going to do. So how are we going to steer the tank? Well, we've got 2 other drivers seated at the back. Sadly, they can't see where they're going, but they're the 2 men that are actually going to steer the tank. That's the British for you. We know how to do things properly. So you've got 3 men steering the tank. So we're going to go that way, which is port, ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know. That's port. So driver 1 will be tapped on the shoulder by the commander, put his foot on the brake and the clutch, the tank comes to a halt. I now have to communicate with drivers 2 and 3 at the back what I want them to do. Quite simply, it's hand signals. There were lights in here, festoon lights, bright enough to see. Clench fist, that means go to out, neutral. One is low ratio, two high ratio. And if you look to the rear, see some red tags. Directly below the red tags, two black levers. And if you read the red tags, you'll note that one is low, two is high, and out is neutral. So what we do, the driver one has brought the vehicle to a halt. I will show a clenched fist to this side. Driver three will put the two black levers to the middle, the out position. There is no physical drive to the chain, which drives the sprocket, which drives the track, which means this track will not go round. There is one to this side. The driver two will select low ratio. That track is powered. Driver one now eases up on the brake and the clutch. Hand throttle goes. That track is powered. We spin this way. When we get to where we want to be, I'll tap the driver and say sufficient. He will put his foot on the brake and the clutch. I will now show one finger to this side. Driver three will select low ratio. Tap driver one on the shoulder. He lifts his foot off the clutch and the brake, and off we go. And that's how this tank is steered in 1917. Very slow, very cumbersome. We have to stop at least twice, and in doing so we are liable to be hit by artillery fire, and that is a problem. By 1918, September of that year, the crew were able, having had 12 months practice perhaps, of changing gear on the move. It was about 1.5, maybe a mile an hour, maybe a bit slower, but they could actually change gear. The reason they didn't do it in 1917, no synchromesh. There was no synchromesh in 1918, and they weren't sure how the gears would operate if they did it at the move. If you break the gear, the tank is dead, so they didn't do it. By 1918, Mark IVs were being used, but being used less frequently than the Mark Vs and Whippets, and as a consequence, they did try and do it, and they were successful at doing it. Right, a mail tank fires these things. That is a 6-pounder round. That's full size for the First World War. 332 of those in this vehicle. There are three types. Case. Case is like a giant shotgun cartridge, so it would be used against people. Solid shot would be used against buildings and blockhouses, and high explosive would be used against anything. High explosive is the only one with a fuse in the end, so when it strikes anything heavy, it goes bang. Obviously this isn't a real one. There's a reason for that. I'm not allowed near live ammunition anymore. Had a habit of blowing things up. I used to be in the Royal Engineers Bomb Disposal Group. So 332 of those, they're stored in these tubes. These tubes are called ready tubes, but there's only 168 tubes. So what are we going to do with the rest? Well, it'll be stored in boxes on the floor by your feet. Machine guns, we have three. The magazines I mentioned, the Hotchkiss is a strip, the Lewis is roundel, and they're kept in these green boxes. There are 4 to my right, 3 to the centre of the vehicle, and 4 to my left, 11 in total, insufficient for our needs. There'll probably be another 4 or 5 boxes on the floor as well. The engine I mentioned is a petrol engine, therefore we must have a petrol tank somewhere. It is outside at the rear. The box it's in is armoured, so it is somewhat protected, and it holds 70 gallons of petrol, and that is quite a lot of petrol. But it's not enough, because on that 70 gallons we'll be able to do between 20 and 25 miles. Not enough, because this tank will be parked 12 miles from the front line. By the time it gets to the front line, into no man's land, fights, turns round, comes back, it'll run out of fuel by the time it gets back and up. So we have to take petrol with us. So there'll probably be 10 1-gallon cans of petrol in here on the floor as well. The engine is sleeve valve. Now that's quite a good invention. Its drawback was it used a lot of oil, because you've got 2 sleeves, metal, sliding against one another. You need to lubricate them. The red box at the other end of the engine is the oil reservoir. It holds 7.5 gallons of oil, and you will top that up twice during the day. So we need to carry 20 gallons of oil in here on the floor by your feet. Grease. There are grease points around the vehicle, so we need to grease the vehicle. There'll be 1 5-gallon tub of grease in here on the floor by your feet. The engine itself is water cooled, and that's quite good. We still do that today. On most automobiles, the engine is water cooled. And to do that, we've got a big white box at the back, which is the radiator, and to the right of the radiator is the fan. Now I'm sure you all know the principle of operation. Hot water from the engine block is pumped to the radiator, the fan cools the water, cool water returns to the engine block, cools the engine, returns to the radiator, and so on, and the cycle continues. And that's a pretty good way of doing it, and that's quite good. There is one small problem with that, because the air intake for that fan is inside the tank. The ambient temperature inside the tank between 50 and 55 degrees centigrade, which means there is a tendency to boil the water in the radiator rather than cool it. So we're going to need to carry 6 to 10 1-gallon cans of water in here to top up the radiator. Each man has his own kit: helmet, greatcoat, gas mask, entrenching tool, spare clothes, food, ammunition for his sidearm. There are 8 men. All of that's got to be stored in here on the floor. I said the tank weighed 28 tons. That's the battle weight. As it sits today, it's just under 26.5 tons, which means 8 men, all their kit, ammunition, supplies and equipment weigh just over 1.5 tons, and that's all got to come inside this tank. Now, one thing we don't have is a radio, because I'm careful of time, we have to finish quite quickly, but today communication is not a problem, because I'm sure you all have a mobile phone. And mobile phones obviously would have been a godsend in the First World War. But sadly we didn't have mobile phones then. Well, actually we did. Because I've got one. I have a 1917 mobile phone, and here it is. And that is a it's mobile, takes messages. Homing pigeons. 2 to a tank, and they were very successful. 98% of all pigeons flown in the First World War got home. The drawback? One-way communication. The only way you'll know it got back is if you get back and find out whether the message got through. That's the only drawback with it. Just before you go though, there is one thing missing from inside the tank. Anybody want to guess what that might be? Well, there are no explosives in here, no, obviously, but there is something on the design feature of the tank that we don't have. Well, there's only one British tank actually to date that has ever had one fitted. Toilet. Exactly right, madam. Challenger 2 has a toilet, this one doesn't. However, we are a mail tank, and when you fire one of those things, you're left with one of those things. Now, the normal way to get rid of these, when they're cool, at the bottom of the door is a little flap. You open the flap and drop them out so. Close the flap. I've just used that as my toilet.
Ray,
yeah.
my friend.
Okay, mate. You're not going to do it. No, that's the way they would do it. Now, unfortunately, you've got to go. I apologise for the time. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay with us at the Tank Museum. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. How many exits there are in the tank?
There are 2, one each door.
Okay.
There's one in the roof, and there's well, it's not a real exit, but you'd get out it if you had to. And the main exit is down the back.
Is that
okay?
I thought it was emergency exit.
Well, that is an emergency exit, but that's an emergency exit. But those are the 2 main exits.
Okay.
They're classed as emergency exits. But if the tank was on fire, I'm sure you'd get out it.
Yeah. What's this used for?
That's diff lock. That'll lock both tracks together.
Ah, okay.
When we're going, we only use it crossing trenches.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, people weren't that big.
I can't even fit in there. You're too big.
This gentleman is